go to March, April, May. 1635 is again the winter on cold, and this time 1636 on heat. Some differences, but really not something to really write home about. We go to the summer, and again, surprisingly, little difference between 1639 and 1637. And then we go to September, October, November. And again, take this with some very large grains of salt, because remember, not only were they doing these proxy reconstructions, if you looked at the original papers that these things are based on, let's say they were using tree ring data. Well, they didn't have good tree ring data that extended from 1500 to 2000 for every grid point. So they would have trees there, tree there, tree there, tree there. Maybe they'd have a couple of hundred trees scattered across Europe. So then they took that, they created their proxy series for each of those individual ones, and then they had some program that depended on a climate model of some kind for interpolating and filling in, that obviously makes certain assumptions as to what's going on with climate that might or might not have been true then. So we get into a certain amount of chicken and the egg situation, that to fill in, we need to know about the climate, but we need to have done the filling in to really calibrate the climate model for that period.
So basically, it's by guess and by golly.
By guess and by golly,
Pretty
but
pictures.
better than nothing, and it gives something to go on if you want to use it. And that brings me to the perturbation area. One of the nice things from the authorial standpoint about the fact that this ring of fire has a butterfly effect, certainly on weather, and to a degree we're about to talk about potentially on climate, is that for the author, you rather get the best of both all possible worlds here. If you're content to rely on what happened historically, then as long as you don't fall into the fallacy of assuming that a specific weather event fell on the same day it fell historically, you can make use of this and you can say, well, the temp froze over in 1635, and I'm going to assume it did the same, and I'll talk about the skaters out there and the frost fair they held selling hot goodies and all the rest of that, and put that in and use that as part of the mise en scene of your story. On the other hand, if for some reason it's really inconvenient to your story dramatically to follow what this is showing is happening, say, in Spain in 1637 in the summer, you can use the butterfly effect of the climate as an excuse for changing it. Indeed, most of the time, if you're writing a story, you're looking at weather effects anyway, and the weather effects are totally scrambled. You can do whatever you please. But even with climate, where you're talking, one moment, if you're talking about things like crop effects and growing the degree days, where what crops you can raise in a particular area. Is there a crop that you used to grow back home in Grantville that you can't grow, or you can't get as much of a crop in now that you're in Thuringia as you did before? You still have on one particular year could be warmer or cooler than this is predicting. Yes?
I wrote a story called The Man in the Pocket, where the rescue had to take place. There was a battle, the rescue had to take place on the Thames. It was in January. After I wrote the story, I did some more research and found out that the Thames was frozen solid across at that point. You away from the battle, where they left their boats. So butterflies are very convenient for
Now, as the canon develops in our 1632 universe, if you're working in the same time periods and more or less the same geographic region as an earlier author, you're going to be bound to a degree by what they've shown of the climate. It seems
Continuity,
that at least
the weather.
around in the Germanys, there have been frequent references to it's really cold here variety. And so you're not going to get away with
It's
a
really
butterfly
not today.
effect that says, oh, there's no little ice age anymore kind of thing, because we've made it very clear that we've got a continuing path. But you certainly can change weather, and you have a little bit of give on the climate side. But you have this stuff to go on if you wish to rely on it.
Yes, but if you write anything in Holstein in a certain year, you're going to have to plan on a lot of water.
Virginia.
Right?
I would point out, though, that as an American who studied in Germany in the 1960s, in that part of Germany, the American plaint was, it's really cold here, even when they weren't having a velocity.
God, Berlin was cold. I don't know where you were, but oh, that was in the 80s. I was gonna freeze
So we have global climate change, don't we?
Oh, sure, the climate's always changing. If you don't,
Some of you may
Yes.
remember on that.
it's also what you're used to.
Some of you
Launch
may
from the back
remember
door,
this,
it's
which
cold,
was from
yeah.
the conclusion of my little Ice Age article. In 1371 to 2, there were processions for rain at Florence in December, followed by processions praying for the rain to stop in May. So people complain about the weather, and there's really no getting around it. Okay, let's talk about the Ring of Fire and what its effect would be. At first, when I started looking at this, I tried to get an idea of what the size of the perturbation was and tried to compare it to other things. And the most obvious thing to compare it to, I thought, was a volcanic eruption. That's extrinsic to climate effects, and it causes a change in temperature in the immediate area. It injects greenhouse gases into the atmosphere and the like. And yeah.
The concept here, it's not just the fact that the sphere from the future shows up. When you start a new timeline, every single yes
and-
no decision could go the other way. So
Okay.
probability changes.
I'm only looking there at the direct weather and climate effects of the Ring of Fire. Obviously, indirect effects can occur. So, for example, if because of what people learn, there's a decision to make a en masse switch from use of wood to use of
Well,
coal
not-
as a
not even
fuel,
that,
that's going to have climate effects.
But improbability, okay, if you've got a probability of a raindrop falling to the left or falling to the right, doesn't matter if there's any human interaction at all, it could go either way now, it's a new future.
Actually,
Yes, but-
before we go any further, guys, we're like 5 minutes over.
Over, it's
The time
5:07.
For people to move around if they want to. So if you need to go to another panel,